Hi, Tasham. I just want to check you can hear me. And have you done a sound check with everyone else?
Hi, Andrea. Yes, I can hear you. I haven't done the sound check of the presenters.
Ahí creo que pude.
Yes,
Hi.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. That's great. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Attilio, we can hear you.
Nice to meet you, Andrea.
And you too.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for agreeing to present. Hello. Hello, Gilbert.
Hello, Prof. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. No longer sitting next to you.
Yeah.
Hello, Ule.
Hi, Andrea. Good to see you.
Yes, you too. Long time.
Long time. Yes, indeed.
Are you keeping well?
Yeah, fine. Still on a temporary payroll for Chemi.
Aha.
But I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. Good. Well, thanks also for agreeing to do this very important talk. So thanks. I know you've done it before. Yeah, it's worth expanding on.
Absolutely. It takes a long time to make change.
It does, yes. So hopefully we'll be looking at some of the challenges that countries have. I'm hoping we have a good turnout.
Yeah.
Okay. It's top of the hour. So let me see. Okay, we haven't got that many people who've joined yet. So if I can just ask that we just briefly wait just a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, if I could ask people who've joined to please introduce themselves in the chat room with their name, country, and organization. If you're not sure where the chat is, it's at the bottom middle hand of your screen. So we'll just literally give just a few minutes for people to join. If you're just joining us, please do introduce yourself in the chat with your name, country, and organization. There's also a link in the chat that will take you to menti.com, and you'll be able to respond to the poll. So what type of organization do you represent? If you are unable to find the link in the chat, then you can go to menti.com and put the code in. It's at the top of the screen. Hello, Chris. I see you've introduced yourself, and great. Christian. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and start, and I'll ask that you continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. If we could have the next slide, please. So welcome everyone to the University of Cape Town's Chemicals Network discussion, which is kindly funded by Sweden through the Swedish Chemicals Agency, Chemi. And I am Professor Andrea Rother. I'm head of the Environmental Health Division at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and you're most welcome. Again, if you're just joining, please do introduce yourself in the chat with your name, country, and organization. And today we're very lucky to have three esteemed presenters who are going to take us through an important topic on issues related to domestically financing chemicals and waste management. So we'll shortly ask each of the presenters to briefly introduce themselves. We will then spend an hour and a half with 3 questions. So each of the presenters will present some of their information. And then we will have a discussion. The discussion will take in the chat. The only people who will be speaking today will be the presenters. So please do continue to ask your questions and respond to questions in the chat. We ask that you include your country when you can. And also you could include your country in your name that's posted now where your share is. So this is a community of practice. It is not a webinar. The intention with this is that we have peer-to-peer learning and problem solving together, and we do this through a discussion. And that's why we'll be involved in the chat. It's a non-partisan group, which means we might not agree with each other's opinions, but we do respect each other's opinions. And so I will now proceed, and I'm going to just briefly ask each of you to introduce yourself. So Ule, I'll hand over to you first.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Very happy to be here in this important forum for discussion, and in particular this topic. My name is Ule Johansson. I work for the Swedish Chemical Agency, where I've been in different positions for more than 30 years, and mostly with development cooperation in these chemical management issues. So thank you.
Thank you. Nice to have you on board again, Ule. Attilio, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning or good afternoon for everyone. First, let me say that I'm really pleased to be part of this initiative and sharing the presentation with Ule and Silver. It's a real pleasure. Currently, I'm the president of the National Association of Solid Waste in Argentina, ARS. ARS is the national member of the International Solid Waste in Argentina, and we are part also of the regional chapter of ISWA in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I will share my views related to, well, our region, especially from what is the situation and possible solution for solid waste management in the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Attilio. Nice to meet you, and thanks for taking of your time. Gilbert, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Professor. And then good morning and good afternoon to all the participants, depending where you are. My name is Gilbert Cuepo. I am the Executive Director of CREP. CREP stands for Centre de Recherche et d'Éducation pour le Développement, a non-profit NGO working on chemical and waste issues. Basically, I am a geochemist by training, but it happened that in my career working on chemical and waste issue, I'm becoming very interested on how the sound management of chemical and waste can be founded in country or at global level. Then very happy to contribute to this discussion. Thank you, Professor, for inviting me.
Thanks, Gilbert. Thanks a lot. All right. So Ule, I will hand over to you to take us through an introduction to the first question.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. We could, yes, thank you for the slide. This topic is, of course, familiar, I think, for everyone. I think we all, at some point, said that we don't have enough resources or financing to do what we want to do. And this area is, of course, no different from others. I think when you start to talk about lack of financing, it's important to establish what we mean and what we actually want to finance. What we're talking about. Is it competent staff? Is it tools for inspection, to analyze? All this, I think, needs to be discussed thoroughly before you began to ask for or seek for financing. And So in this context, I think it's important to discuss some key terms to establish what we actually want to do and what we mean with sustainable financing. So we could go to the next slide, please. So I've picked some key terms, and I begin with responsibility. And I think why I want to talk about responsibility in this context is because if you as a government take on the responsibility, for example, for risk assessment of chemicals, you also then need a lot of financing, versus if you think that risk assessment could be done by the private sector or the industry, then the cost will stay mainly with the industry. So it's a very important issue to really decide where should the responsibility lie, so that you then you will know what you need to finance or not. And in the same line of thinking, what chemicals are we talking about? What do we actually need to take control of? All chemicals, or maybe the most toxic ones? Again, this will have an effect on what you need to finance or not. And here, since we have experts on the panel concerning waste, it's important to establish when are we talking about waste and when are we talking about the chemicals. Because there would be different sources of financing for handling waste and handling the production and approval of chemicals before they enter the market. And then again, sustainable. We talk about sustainable financing. What do we mean with that? Is taxes sustainable? Fees, donor money? What is long-term funding? And I think this is also something that we need to talk about. And financing, is that cash or could it be something else? And I would like to say that it, of course, often means getting money, but it can also be cooperation between institutions like universities providing some services, other expert institutes providing services, cooperation between countries so that you can share the burden of risk assessment is also one way of financing, if you could say so, your activities as a government institution. So all this needs to be considered. So can you get next slide, please? I think I haven't seen the slide change. And next slide, please. Yes. And usually when we talk about financing and we talk about money, there is three different sources. We talk about taxes, we talk about fees, and we talk about donor or funds, funding institutions. And this is, of course, also very important to see the difference between these sources. Taxes, I would say, is one way of a long-term funding, but there is a challenge because usually taxes go into the state treasury, and it's not certain that enough of these funds will be directed to you or your activities. You have to be arguing strongly to get your ministry or your institution to get your share of the taxes. Fees usually is a bit more secure and long-term, because fees can be, you target the subjects that you want to control to also pay the fees. And then you could say that that type of funding will be more earmarked for you. I know that this is not always the case, that fees can be safeguarded for the one purpose, but I think it's a bigger possibility to get that. Donor money or funds that you can apply from donors, I would say is not really sustainable financing. It can be very useful for starting up activities or specific in time limited projects to get some specific things done. But if we talk about long-term and sustainable financing, I think you cannot say that this type of donor funding is sustainable or long-term. So it's important really to strive, I would say, to secure long-term funding rather than donor money for your activities. With next slide, please, and that would be the question. So, in your context, how should governments work with chemicals and waste be funded? Are we talking about taxes, fees, donors, or a combination of these? Are there other options? What kind of challenges do you or options do you see from your perspective? So with that, I will leave the floor to the group, or Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ule. Thanks very much for actually setting the scene and explaining, the different aspects of what you could fund and the different scenarios. So I invite you to leave your mic on and your video on, and you're welcome to respond to the responses in the chat. So just a reminder to everyone with this community of practice, the discussion will take place in the chat room. So if you could respond, I see Debbie already has, thank you, to the question that has been posed to you by Ule. And if you can include your country in your discussion, that helps. And it's really important, we're trying to see about how we can problem solve about improving domestic financing in countries and what are the challenges countries face. So I'll see you in the chat room. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Ule, there's some comments coming through. I don't know if you would like to respond to those.
Yeah, I've seen some comments here. Yes, I think a combination of approaches is important, and I think in many countries you would see a combination of different sources. My own authority in Sweden is an example of that. And there was a question about the difference between chemicals and waste by different ministries. And yes, I think there should be different funding structures for many reasons. And I think we will hear a bit more about that with the later presenters, that waste is in many ways a different thing than approving a pesticide, for example. And then there was a question if fines would be considered as fees, but I would say no. Usually fines of different kinds is a punishment for something, bad behavior, but the fees you are collected because of your activities and not because of that you're doing something wrong. So two different things. And there's a recommendation to have a clear budget line for chemical management by government. I can only second that, and I think if you can get that, it's good. That means that the issue of chemical management is acknowledged.
So we have a poll question, how your work or institution is financed currently, and the link to menti.com is in the chat. So if you just click on that, you can go straight in and type your response and also list your country in your response. And back to you, Ule, to respond to the chat.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Many questions coming here, or statements. And there's one statement about fragmentation. And yes, I think that is a challenge for chemical management issues. They are cross-cutting. Many ministries are involved. And I think that is a challenge. But I think the most important part there is for the government to really be clear on which ministry has what responsibility, and then you can talk about what kind of financing. And then government should have a budget for this, but charge producers some fees for its administration as well. Yes, in the end, of course, I say this at different times also, that in the end, of course, financing will come from the taxpayers or the producers, industry in some sort.
So there's a question for you, Ule, from Debbie. I don't know if you've seen
that.
Yeah,
I saw that now. Conflicting legislation is, of course, a trouble, but it's another issue, really, not the financing issue, but an important one, of course, that the government really need to frame the different categories so that everyone knows. This is, of course, still not a simple task. When is a waste, and when you use waste and make it into a product again, then you have a problem of definition, which is an issue. And Monica is writing that it's a mix of donor funds and government, which I think is very common. And it's nothing wrong with that, but I think in the long term, you would try to move away from being dependent on donors. And Dina, I think the government work on chemicals should be funded by taxes from chemical industry. In principle, I agree. And then you just have to decide on how to do that. And also secure that the tax money or fees, whatever you decide, which way you try to do it, you should see that it's used for its purpose. And Edward from Kenya, you say that you're in principle donor funded dependent. So I think that's an urgent issue for you to also get the Treasury to actually acknowledge chemical management in the state budget. You should take a look at the report Cost of Inaction and show it to your Treasury that if we don't do things, it will cost us more later. Ibukun, private sector can implement sustainable solutions and services that will be paid for by the industry. Yes, absolutely. Can only agree. And Monica, you see a problem or a challenge that tax and fees goes into the government treasury. Then, as I said, just mentioned, you have to persuade the treasury that a segment of this fund should go to chemical management. Please take a look at the report, Cost of Inaction, a UNEP report, where you can really show the gains you will do if you do something. And Debbie, you put the finger on a problem with the where empty containers end up in the landfills, and of course have a negative impact on this. I know that empty containers is an issue in many countries.
So Ule, you can also comment on the poll if you like. I know it's rolling on the middle of your screen.
Yeah, sorry, I had a whole screen with this chat, so I didn't see.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah. So much to comment on.
I think you can just highlight if there's any key points that you haven't already commented on.
Yes.
Because we've got about 3 minutes left for this discussion.
Mm-hmm. there is someone writing about the crucial role of NGOs and their dependence on donors. That's interesting, I think. I think we all see the importance of NGOs. And one way for NGOs, I'm biased here from Sweden, but is that you would make NGOs stronger if you have a lot of members associated to your NGO that also pay a member fee. Could be a way of securing long-term funding and not be so dependent on donors. A backside of having the government being too dependent on NGOs is of course also a problem for the government.
So we have 1 minute left if you'd like to make any concluding statements, or if you want to just look at the chat, if there's any last points that you would like to speak to.
I think I've made many of the most important comments here. And I think my final comment would really be to strive for securing funding for government activities from the taxes and fees that the government collect themselves, and kind of try to move away from being too donor dependent, would be my final comment.
I think that's a very good final comment to end on, and I'm actually going to allow a minute for any responses to that comment. So how do people who are from low and middle income countries feel about that? I think there's a lot of discussions internationally about moving more toward donor funding. Are there any thoughts or comments about Ule's last statement about having less reliance on donor funding? Not seeing any comments. People are thinking about the implications of that.
Yeah.
So do you think, Ule, the best way to move away from donor funding, you said then, was taxes?
Yeah, well, I mix, because I think there is targeted issues. Like, for example, if you want to have a product register or an inventory on a regular basis, usually there's quite easy to target the group of industry that are involved in that, and that you can direct fees to them. So, and then other areas, more of information and public consultations maybe should be funded by taxes. So I think a mix of tax and fees can be useful for most governments.
Thank you. Well, thanks for that. It's a good point to end on. And thank you very much for leading us in the beginning of this discussion with some very important issues. And you can continue to respond to any comments if you'd like to in the chat. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, I'll hand over to Attilio to take us through an introduction to question 2. So if we can have the next slide, please. And Attilio, you need to unmute yourself. There you go. Over to you. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Ule, for your presentation. It was very clear, and your answers were very enthusiastic to move on in this so important question and matter. So please, next slide, please, to present what is the background about financing solid waste management. And there are a lot of publications that stress the idea that models for financing waste management deserve full attention, because it's a key issue, especially in developing countries. No, those models should be oriented to prevent pollution, thinking about the life cycle concept about waste, the necessary idea that the producer principle should be included in all the diagram of the system, and most of all to the internalization of the cost. No, this is the basic concept of financing. But next slide, please. If methodologically we can analyze finances by itself, I prefer to present it as a most holistic situation related to what we could consider it is a bigger system. And coming back to history, how was the initiation of solid waste management? We have to go back to the 19th century, when concerns about public health led to the city authorities to being given legal responsibility for the safe collection and disposal of municipal solid waste. So here the responsibility was directed to municipalities, and since then we can consider solid waste management as a public service. And with this idea of system, what we can define as a system and what shall it include? If any system needs to be operated in a sustainable manner over time, we have to consider if the system can ensure public health in the cities, give us an environmental protection at the local and global level, consider that there is now a necessity and a challenge to go to a circular economy, then that resource management should be included in the concept of the system to close the loop by returning materials and nutrients to the production process, with the contribution of waste prevention, minimization, and reuse and recycling. But we have also to consider another really important ingredients, like the system should be inclusive by providing spaces of transparency for all the stakeholders, to be financially sustainable, which means being cost effective and affordable. That means a financial viability, and to lead on a foundation of sound institution and proactive policies. In the international solid waste, we are really focused in the matter of financing. And then at the beginning of 2022, a task force was created to analyze the whole ingredients of financing. And then we start a part of this task force, and then we produce this matrix to analyze what we should consider to discuss solid waste management financing. First of all, we have to have a look in what has been done and written, because then the academia has a potential contribute. And we have to analyze all the stakeholders, because if solid waste management is a first responsibility of a municipality, it should be integrated with national, provincial, or state regulation. Then local governments should consider this this very important situation with the proper institution. We can also go to if private banks could help to do that, also to do the investment that are necessary. The international financial institutions are also a key player in this sense, but we have to consider that considering the international financial institution, how they finance investment in solid waste management, we have to say that less than 1% of the total funds are directed to waste management, because waste management has to compete with the investment in health, in infrastructure, in education. We have to analyze if the waste management sector is very well developed in our region, in our country, in our municipality. We have to consider what is the role of the producers. And then what we will need is a regulation related to the standard producer responsibility, because this is or will constitute a perfect tool to get more funds to the sector. The academia, as I mentioned, has a key role, and thinking about inclusion, we have to think about what is the role, the important role in our countries with the urban recyclers. And then in what we have to put our ideas, our thinking in how we build this system. Then the first question is how much will it cost to provide waste management, not only in our region, but not only in our country, but only in our region. We have to consider also the ways of financing, because there are many ways, as Ule mentioned, about taxes, fees, etc. And then we have here the citizen plays an important role, because if it is a public service, then there is a need that the citizen pays for this service. The waste management governance is another issue, because the local authorities, but the national one, has to build this institutional framework to give a guarantee to the provision of this service. Then we have to analyze how the waste management system could be fractionalized and understand how much of collection, how much of final disposition, how much of treatment, how much of resource recovery should it include according to the characteristics of our municipality or our region. Then if citizens have to pay for the service, then we have to analyze their willingness to pay, and not only the willingness, but the affordability, how much of their income should be dedicated to pay for this service. And least, but not the last one, we have to describe the consequences of inaction, because how much will it cost to repair human health and the complication or the protection of our environment. So with this idea, we can go to the question, and then we can interact with your answer. So what kind of system should be provided to finance waste management in your country? What should it include at a minimum? And list your country response. Thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we hear you.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you so much, Attilio. Andrea had to drop off, but we can continue with the question. And thank you to all the participants. We can move to question 1 and discuss how what should be provided to finance waste management in your country. And if you can insert your country in the response, it will be appreciated. Thank you so much.
Question 2, right?
Yes, we're discussing question 2. And Attilio, you're welcome to stay on and respond to the questions.
Yes, of course. Here there is one. Well, here is the question. It's a combination of donor funds and environmental tax portion. I would prefer not depend in donor funds. Of course, they are good to receive, but we cannot in the whole financing of the system with donor fund. And I don't like too much about environmental tax portion, because it was said that perhaps this will go to the treasury, and then it's sometimes difficult that the money will come back to the sector. I strongly believe that a good regulation related environmental the role of the industry, of the producer, has to pay with they put in the market, no? And I think that EPR is the tool that in developing countries should be used to help to the system. Well, it's not easy in our countries to have a good role about extended producer responsibility. In my country, in Argentina, we are discussing it through the last 20 years, and we do not have a law. So really, it's a political decision that implies a consensus, and of course the decision of the producers to understand their responsibility to put the product in the market, and they have to pay for the waste they produce. Yes, the producers are key to finance the system. When you build a scheme of standard producer responsibility, you have to establish the responsibilities of all the chains, not only the producers, but also those who are the consumers of this process, and all who are in distributing or commercializing the product. Yeah, not only plastic. I think all the material should be included in this scheme of external producer responsibility. Because we have to think that this system, the external production responsibility, is something like a catalyzer of the circular economy. If we do not have a proper scheme, then circular economy is not very easy to implement.
Thank you so much for your responses. I see we have more comments coming in. I'm going to post the poll question. So if you can look at the poll and send your responses by using the link in the chat, or simply go to mentimeter.com and include the code in response to our first poll. Thank you.
You can continue to respond to the second question while you're also commenting on the poll. And my apologies, I disappeared for quite a while. We're having internet issues today. But thank you, Attilio. I see you've been responding to many of the comments that are being posted.
Okay, well, I can see all the answer, and of course, a good combination in fees and public budget would be important because here the responsibility, of course, is from the government, but also from the citizen. And of course, if international financial institution has a key role, we should think that these funds should go to the least developed countries, because 2/3 of the money in the last years are gone to middle-income countries. So I think this should be changed to that this money should go to the less developed countries, because those countries are those who are really with no tools to improve the solutions.
So I've posed the question as to whether countries currently are, if there's more financing available for chemicals management or waste management, or would you say it's equal? And Ule, it'd be interesting also if you could comment what it's like in Sweden in the chat.
Yes, both are really very dramatic question to be answered properly. So traditionally, we can consider to analyze together chemical and waste, and the United Nations has a strong division related to chemical and waste. And of course, the implementation of the solution should be diverse, but I think they are part of the same problem.
Yeah, in Swedish perspective, I think they would be treated differently, but of course part of the same problem.
See, of course, yes. Well, here is a very important mention about transboundary approach, and this is the Basilea Convention, and I think it is really a challenge to implement all the decision of the Basilea Convention, not to hurt developing countries with waste that is not properly exported from their producers. I think public budget is really very important, and if a government decide to spend money in different infrastructure, then a proper public budget should be allocated in solid waste management. And the integration between national, state, or provincial level and the municipalities. Then here the national government should help those municipalities who are not able to develop a proper system. I think there is also a question that is not always discussed in our country, and what is the role of citizens and the society to implement a sustainable waste management. In most of our country, I can speak about my region, the idea that citizens should pay for waste management is not considered. So I think we have to work in this discussion, because personally, I think that those who are able to pay should pay. And in the international solid waste, in the waste management outlook, it is considered that less than 1% of the national income or the per capita income should be dedicated to pay for solid waste management. So this could create the affordability to do that.
In Sweden, we have many different ways of financing and arranging waste collection. But I know that most cities, municipalities, you have to pay a fee when you have your house or your apartment for collecting garbage. And part of that fees is used to pay the waste handler, but also part of it's used to build up collection points, places where people can go and leave hazardous waste, for example.
And this is the integrity of all the solution, no? O sea, how the society could be a stakeholder in the process.
Yes, absolutely.
So we just have a couple minutes left for question 2, and I see it's been quite a vibrant discussion. Attilio, I don't know if you'd like to make some last comments, either on what you've seen or haven't seen, or what is in the poll.
No, my last comment is to insist in the idea that solid waste management is a public service, and as a public service should be considered not only for the producer or the industry, the producer of product, but also for the governments or the institutional regulation for this service, but also for the whole society. And we have to pay attention for the affordability of this payment if we consider that fees are a solution. And then there are schemes in Colombia, for example, that those who have more pay a little bit more, so those who have low that the median income don't pay. So I think we have to look for this kind of solution, because the solution of the problem is responsible of the government, but the whole society has to play a role.
Thank you, Attilio. I think that's a really important point to end on, you know, the sort of responsibility of all in terms of waste production and waste disposal. But it is a challenging one, living in a low and middle income country. You know, how do you apportion that? And again, you know, sort of who's responsible for the waste that is actually, you know, being produced in terms of all the packaging. But thank you. You've really, it's been an important discussion, especially since on the international platform, you know, we are discussing at the moment with SAICM Beyond 2020 of putting waste and chemicals management together. And this question of, you know, financing both of them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please do continue to respond to comments that are in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. Gilbert, I invite you to turn your video on and to unmute yourself and lead us through the discussion for question 3. I hand the mic over to you. We can't see you yet, but I think you're unmuted. Gilbert, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. I'm trying to turn on my video, but seemed like it was turned off that side.
I'll have the staff look into turning it on. In the meantime, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Professor Andreas. I would like to thank also Mr. Johansson and then Savino for their presentation. And then I was asked to give input to the barriers related to domestic financing of chemical management. I will tackle this issue from developing country perspective, and then understanding that chemical management in this context means the full implementation of the chemical-related convention, like Basel Convention, Stockholm Convention, Rotterdam Convention, the Minamata Convention, and the SAICM, the strategic approach. And the implementation means that we have enough resources to implement the national implementation plan, the national action plan, to strictly follow the guidelines that are coming with this convention, particularly through the Basel Convention. This is the understanding of why we use maybe the management of chemical in that context. So we should recall that at the 2002 World Sustainable Development Summit, the government agreed to achieve by 2020 that chemicals are used and produced in a way that lead to the minimization of significant adverse effect on human health and environment. So the MEA that I list up are contributing to this goal through their specific and individual legal mandate. So, and we all know that SAICM is handling maybe 99.9% of the chemical that we are using, because the other MEA are touching just part of the chemical that we have out there. So SAICM is important, and I would like to focus on the discussion on this aspect of SAICM. SAICM is a non-binding strategic approach to international chemical management that aim also at the 2020 goal by focusing on larger chemicals that are not covered by other MEAs. And we all know that SAICM has been there for 15 years, and then evaluation was made. And then the evaluation made point to the fact that SAICM could not achieve its 2020 goal. And the main reason is that there was lack of funding at national level, funding at the international level to implement the sound management of chemicals. Now, as Professor Andrea said, SAICM is currently in the process of considering its beyond 2020 objective, structure, and target. So we need to reshape SAICM. So, and then in order to facilitate the resource mobilization for the sound management of chemicals, the Governing Council of UNEP in 2013 has adopted what we call the integrated approach of chemical management. So in its decision 27/12, the Governing Council called for the implementation of the integrated approach in order to secure sustainable, next slide, sustainable, predictable, adequate, and accessible financing for the sound management of chemical and waste. This is what was agreed by the government, that we need sustainable, predictable, adequate, accessible financing for the sound management of chemical. And when we speak about sustainable and predictable, that is mean we have a kind of permanent source or reliable source when we can generate money to maybe facilitate or help assist in the sound management of chemical. And then as the integrated approach, you can go to the next slide, please. And you see the integrated approach in the framework of SAICM has three pillars: the mainstreaming, the industry involvement, and the external dedicated financing. The mainstreaming is what government can do at local level. The industry involvement can be at local or at global level. External dedicated financing is maybe good from JEF, from donor, and from special program and other type of program and international collaboration for the sound management of chemical and waste. But for this discussion, I will focus on mainstreaming and industry involvement as it touches on domestic financing for chemical management. Next slide, please. Yes, in terms of mainstreaming, what government has been trying to do at local level for the sound management of chemical is that they put in place institution and regulation for the sound management of chemical and waste. But this does not really correlate with the financing that can be generated. So we have, like many countries, particularly for Africa, have in place the Ministry of Environment or the specific department that are dedicated to the chemical management issue. We have also some government, like in Cameroon, we have the so-called environmental fund. That is actually the fiscal environmental tax. As the previous speaker said, we collect the money, but it is not necessarily used for the purpose that is clearly defined. It goes to the national budget, and then difficult to get it out to maybe use for the sound management of chemicals. So at this level, we already see what are some kind of barrier, like a legal barrier, like institutional barrier, and we have also some kind of barrier. So the fund that come to this, the source of the money that are generated for this environmental fund or any kind of fund that are out there in different countries, most of them are defined for industry non-compliance, maybe with chemical and environmental law at national country. We have the government inspection fee, because when the government goes to the field for inspection of industry or any kind of plan, there is a kind of fee that is paid back depending on the country. We have the fee for environmental impact assessment that is sometimes done asked by industry or private company in order to establish a plan. That fee goes into that plan, into that fund. We have also the portion of the government budget that is allocated for the sound management of chemical, though most of the time it's never come to reality. We have the pesticide registration fee. In many countries, there is a mechanism to register pesticide, and in order to register the pesticide, there is a fee that the pesticide company pay, and this supposed to go to that fund. And we also, in the case of Cameroon, for instance, due to plastic pollution, there is a tax on plastic PET bottle container that the brewery company pay to the government or to the financing system, and this is supposed to be used for the sound management or maybe for of plastic or plastic waste when they become waste. So this is a problem, but at this level we see that we have a problem using or generating enough funds through mainstreaming, though we recognize that the government is doing much. It has many other challenges like poverty, money, other priority. So all these funds that are collected at the end of the day are used for more urgent issue in the country. So making sound management of chemical very little found or get little attention at the country level. When we take the pillar industry involvement that was recommended by the UNEP Governing Council. At the country level, we say the problem is a lack of clarity and coherence in the allocation of mandate and responsibility between public body and industry that prevent the effective and cost-efficient involvement of the industry already in our domestic context. We see that there is also lack of implementation of appropriate economic instruments like tax, fee, or charge that can provide financing for chemical management, in particular cost recovery measure to shift the burden of public costs of financing chemical from government to private source or to industry. That is the cause of the problem we are trying to solve. We still in there, we see that there is a big challenge for industry involvement in the context of developing country, because we have a kind of divide between developed and developing country when we think in terms of how to mobilize domestic resource for the sound management of chemical. Because it depends on the structure of the chemical industry or the industry we have in developing country and developed country. It is a kind of SMA versus multilateral company that may be coming into the country. And when we try to get this kind of industry involvement at local level, there is a challenge that government really face on this one. Because industry involvement through economic instrument at national level is inappropriate. It generates insufficient money when we try to implement it. We don't have enough money because multinational for some time make the trade that they will move to the next country where the legislation or fiscal legislation is more favorable for them. And then you will also have the fact that in the developing country, multinationals are sometimes more powerful than the government, and they pretend that they have already paid a tax in the country where the product is produced. So we have a lot of challenge at the country level, maybe in the context of the developing country, we have a lot of barrier at the national level to mobilize enough financing for the sound management of chemical and waste. And then As I said, within the SAICM post-2020, there is a discussion how to secure such kind of funding for the sound management of chemical and waste. And the discussion is now about what kind of industry and what level we can apply the economic instrument for the sound management of chemical and waste. Because we all know that chemical and this trade component is a global issue, and most of the developing countries are just the importing country, and then could not generate enough money for the implementation of the sound management of chemical. Again, we understand by the sound management of chemical, the full and appropriate implementation of the MEA-related convention, like Basel Convention that has no funding mechanism, Rotterdam Convention that has no funding mechanism, Stockholm and Minamata Convention has funding mechanism, but they are not sufficient because donors do not put on the table enough money for the sound management of chemical. SAICM is supported by Jeff partially for the objective that warrant a global action. So it is very difficult then for developing countries to really generate domestic resource for the sound management of chemical. And then we have a question on the how to proceed. Next slide. Next slide. So the question is, given that low and medium and middle income countries face challenges implementing an integrated approach for the financing chemical management at national level, including challenge with industry involvement at this level, how could an integrated approach be implemented at the global level instead? So this is the question for the participant. We see from the developing country perspective how it is really difficult because to get industry paid for that we can use for the sound management of the chemical they produce.
Thank you, Gilbert, for taking us through quite a lot of important components that are being discussed at the moment at the international level. And I invite everyone to please respond to the question posed in the chat, and we'll also have a poll. And we have about 14 minutes left for our discussion. So please do continue. Thank you. So we have our last poll for today. And again, you can click on the link in the chat, which will take you straight to Mentimeter, or you can go to menti.com and put in the code. So what do you think is needed to develop or perhaps improve in your country a robust national external producer responsibility to implement the polluter pays principles for chemicals management? And you can put your country in as well. Thank you.
high capacity training, financial support, enforcement, yes, these are good. Yeah, we don't think a regulator always have the good information on how to structure and implement EPA system for chemical and waste management. And this is due to the fact that we still have the issue of less priority at the national level in terms of attention that is given to chemical and waste issue at national level. Yes, there are some barriers on the maybe implementing the industry involvement at the global level, exactly due to some selfish interests. But we should not abandon the fight, because it is where we can really have sustainable and predictable financing, because more we produce chemical or some basic chemical, more we will generate enough fund for the sound management of chemical and waste. There is no way we can continue to rely on taxpayer maybe to fund the management of chemical that the industry are producing. So there is, it may take time, but we need some kind of cost recovery or levy at the global level at some point to be able to really, if we are serious with our mandate or commitment for the sound management of chemical and waste. The solution is try to really implement the polluter pay principle. That is, there is an integrated approach, but the pillar of industry involvement is the pillar that should generate enough money, not maybe external dedicated funding or donor funding, as Johansson made in his presentation. We can't rely on such kind of funding. It is unstable, it is unpredictable. The predictable one is the one related to maybe economic instrument that we pay as we produce the chemical. That is a short way to put it, and we will have predictable, because if we produce more, we will have more resources. We produce less, we will have less but enough resource to manage what we have produced. Legislation and financial and economic instrument, yes, both should be, not only legislation, because we know how the challenge of implementing legislation in our country, it is also a big challenge. So we should use the two, the legislation and also the economic instrument.
Gilbert, do you want to comment on anything that you are seeing on the external producer or extended producer responsibility in the poll?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, but we think that EPA is good for maybe a country with certain capacity, like developed country, but EPR in developing country is a challenge because we know and we see even in developed country, institutions 30% of what they need for the sound management of chemical registration of chemical to operate. And if you have that in developed countries, how can we expect to perform better in developing countries? I see a lot of EPR, but EPR is something that cannot really generate enough money at the national level. Training is good, but to understand, and then a cost of action versus cost of inaction. This is a kind of maybe a language that decision and regulator can understand when we try to frame in this way what is lost when we do not act, or what we gain when we act. And definitely it is, we need all these kind of instrument, and then dependent on the country, on the national circumstances, to generate enough funding and to bypass the barrier that we are facing at domestic level for the sound management of chemical and waste. Minimizing challenge faced by country to secure a resource for chemical management. Yeah, government play a key role, and I'm looking for your answer.
So thanks. Actually, we did have one more poll.
Because we heard in the discussion, during the SICAM meeting that a lot of money, and certainly vehicle and waste, but they said most of the countries that will benefit that money do not have governance to handle such kind of big money. They are corrupted, and then they have kind of concern putting on the table such kind of big money for the government that there is no traceability and no kind of maybe responsibility. And we answer to them that if the involvement, this industry involvement is fully implemented, then the reporting should be also mandatory under SICAM, for instance. So government should be responsible to report on what they have done with the money. And also it is suggested that if the involvement is to be accepted, there should be a special fund, global fund with a board that will maybe decide on the criteria to allocate money to the country that need money for the sound management. So there should be a kind of TOR to assist country to fully use properly this money. Yes, I agree. That is cost recovery, maybe, or internalize the cost, so that when the products is put into the market, it should have its real price. Because now we have the feeling that the product that we have on the market does not have the real price, because industry try to externalize the cost. And having less chemical on the market is better for the environment and our health. So having maybe the price can maybe slightly impact on the access to the chemical, but that will be good for the consumer that is less exposed to chemical. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, thank you very much, Gilbert. We just have a few minutes left, and we are about to do a final evaluation poll. And before I conclude, is there any last statement that you'd like to make?
The last statement is that now we have an opportunity more than ever to learn from or strive to manage chemicals. And then we have an independent evaluation of the instrument that we put together to try to achieve the 2020 goal. And then the instrument has its independent evaluation, and we should build on the recommendation that came out of this evaluation in order to frame or to design the Beyond 2020 instrument so that we can achieve the sound management of chemical and waste through the vision that we will design for the next instrument. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a very good last statement. So thank you very much for that. And everyone will note that those of us living in low and middle income countries are really battling with electricity and internet challenges, never mind chemicals and waste management. So I want to thank everyone for putting up with all the internet challenges that all of us have had. But despite that, we've had a very fruitful discussion, and I really would like to thank very much the three presenters who took the time to think through the issues and to present them to us. I'd also like to thank the participants for responding and stimulating discussion amongst our panelists. And this is really important in what we're trying to generate in this community of practice. Financing is a very difficult topic, and I hope we will continue to see how we can find solutions together. There is a poll on the screen at the moment if you'd like to indicate how you will use the information. We do have a discussion coming up again in a few weeks' time that Eunice will post shortly. If you haven't joined the community of practice, please do. We will have a digest summarizing the key points of today's discussion for you to share with others. We will also share the presentation slides, and we do have a recording that's available. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you very much to the presenters, and I wish you all a good day or good evening or good start to your day wherever you are. So thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Andrea.
Thanks, Ulie. Thanks, Attilio.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Gilbert.
Take care. Yeah,
You too.
Attilio. And
Meet again. Bye.
yes. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you.
Ciao.